This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
The U.S. government has agreed to pay nearly $116 million to settle lawsuits brought by 103 women who survived sexual abuse and assault at a federal prison in Dublin, California, which was shuttered earlier this year. The facility, FCI Dublin, became known as the Rape Club due to rampant sexual abuse by prison staff, including the former warden, who's now in jail after being convicted of sexually abusing women at the prison. The Los Angeles Times reports $116 million is the largest amount ever paid by the federal government for misconduct at a federal prison.
We're joined now by two guests. Courtney Hanson is a community organizer with the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, which helped launch the Dublin Prison Solidarity Coalition to advocate alongside survivors for systemic changes inside prisons. Aimee Chavira was formerly incarcerated at FCI Dublin and is part of the class action sexual abuse lawsuit against the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We're going to go first to Courtney. Courtney Hanson, explain the background of this case.
Well, as you said, this current monetary settlement is the largest aggregate settlement in BOP history. And we are seeing this type of legal victory because of the courage of survivors who were incarcerated at FCI Dublin. And our organization, the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, started going into Dublin in 2022 with extremely dedicated attorneys to hear these survivors who were speaking out and build power and solidarity with them across the walls.
And Aimee, if you could respond to this decision by the federal government to pay $116 million to women. You yourself were in prison there.
Yes. Hi, good morning. What do I think? I think this is a victory. I think this shows that everything that has been going on in there was, and it is true, and it's still going on. It doesn't change anything. Money, no amount of money will change what was done to us and what continues to happen.
Aimee, can you explain what did happen? Tell us over these last years what took place and when you were imprisoned there in the Dublin federal prison.
Sexual abuse, rape, assault, verbal abuse, retaliation. Behind these federal walls, people don't understand and can't imagine the severity of this problem. We were sentenced to go to prison and pay for our crime, which is no problem. But that wasn't happening. We were paying for our crime and being assaulted, sexually assaulted, mistreated, retaliated on. It went from locking us in our room. I was locked in my room and asked for me to conduct sexual activities or things. I was retaliated, sent by the warden, who is now in prison, as I complained. There's a lot of, once you start complaining behind, when you're in prison, the retaliation starts. It's not easy. It's not fun. It's not funny. These are real things that are going on in these prisons, not just Dublin. FCI Dublin went through this. This is across the board. These are all prisons. I'm sorry if I get a little bit emotional. The retaliation went from, once you complain to the warden, I myself complained to the warden on one morning. That same morning, he sent Officer Ramos, who is no longer alive. He took his own life, with another officer, Officer DeLuca. They strip searched 3 inmates in my cell, then took me to, which is called R&D. It's when you get to prison and, you got to go through this process. And I was taken there to get strip searched, to later on being asked and demanded that it was a direct order for me to strip, hand my clothes over, and use my fingers, my hand, to go across my private part. Not one, not two, a couple, more than a couple of times. Is this right? Is this what? I don't think my judge sentenced me to go through this. These are heinous crimes. The punishment that I believe they should get is more than what we have gotten. We have gotten very far, and I'm very grateful. I have joy, but we still have a long journey ahead of us to keep fighting for, for these officers in uniform to be held accountable.
Aimee, I just want to say how brave you are, what a woman of courage you are to be willing to speak out about what happened to you. And of course, what this has led to is this more than $100 million settlement. And I'm wondering, Courtney, if you can explain how this was organized. This in no way takes away this pain and suffering from the women in the prison, but how this settlement came about.
Well, I just want to say also it has been truly the honor of a lifetime to organize alongside courageous survivors like Aimee, and this was truly a robust, collective, grassroots effort that could not have happened, first of all, without survivors organizing amongst themselves, and then dedicated movement attorneys, those at Rights Behind Bars and the California Collaborative for Immigrant Justice, and then our organization also with an inside-outside model going in and bringing the information and the stories and the demands out. And it's also important to note that this monetary win comes on the heels of another massive legal victory earlier this month in a separate but related class action lawsuit in which our organization was a lead plaintiff alongside individual survivors. And this is a lawsuit that is demanding, and it looks like winning through a proposed settlement agreement and consent decree, policy changes. We need policy changes to ensure that this type of staff sexual abuse stops happening. And like Aimee said, it's still happening all across BOP facilities in this country where Dublin survivors are still being held by their abusers.
So Aimee, just to go back to you, I mean, we're very, very sorry for this horrific violence that you endured in this prison. I just want to ask, were you aware at the time that there were so many other women who were being subjected to sexual violence as well at the same time as you were?
Yes, Aimee, and it's very important for people to know that it's hard to communicate with each other because it causes a shame, you're ashamed. It's embarrassing. But we all knew about each other, and it's hard. It was hard then to speak with one another of the stuff that was going on, of us being seen, being showered, them opening our curtains as we're in the shower, as we're changing, and, we're not dressed. So many women in there that I know and that we now are able to talk about and say, I'm so sorry, I knew what was going on and we didn't talk about it then. This was not, and this is just 103 women. We're talking about this prison held a lot of more prisoners, a lot of more inmates at this time. So it was their culture that these officers created there. This was their small world of them abusing us, and it happened every time, every day. You look to your left and something was going on to someone else. You look to your right and there's another inmate, being locked in their room. This is a huge problem. This is not just a culture at Dublin. This is happening in other prisons across the board. And it's important for people to know that we need to stop. We need to stop this abuse that we're going through.
And now this settlement means, Aimee, that you and the other women will receive on average $1.1 million each of you?
No. I think that, it's going to go evenly. That's not the way it's going to happen. There is a judge, I'm not a special at, answer this for you, but it's not even across the board, no.
Well, Aimee Chavira, we want to say thank you so much for being with us and being willing to share your story. Formerly incarcerated at FCI Dublin, the federal prison in California, part of the class action sexual abuse lawsuit against the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And Courtney Hanson, community organizer with the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, which helped launch the Dublin Prison Solidarity Coalition. Last question to Courtney. Courtney, are there other prisons where you're going through the same kind of negotiation and could lead to settlements like this?
Our current proposed consent decree in our class action lawsuit, which was demanding injunctive relief and policy changes on behalf of everybody, like Aimee said, who was impacted by the culture of violence at Dublin. If that consent decree gets approved by the judge, it will apply to over 12 BOP facilities across the country where Dublin survivors are currently held. And this is just the beginning. This is not the end. We will continue through grassroots advocacy, perhaps future legal action if necessary, to figure out how to ensure that this never happens again. And we need to note that President Biden, with a stroke of his pen, could ensure that these Dublin survivors come home for the holidays where they belong, where they could heal with their families in safety.
Courtney Hanson, thank you so much. That does it for our show. You can watch our show on podcast, video, and audio. See our transcripts at democracynow.org and get our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Democracy Now! Is produced with Mike Burke, Renee Feltz, Anjali Kamat, Dina Guzder, Messiah Rhodes, Nermeen Sheikh, Maria Taracena, Tammy Warrenoff, Charina Nadura, Sam Alcoff, Tamarie Astudio, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud, and Hannah Elias. Our executive director is Julie Crosby. Special thanks to Becca Staley, John Randolph, Paul Powell, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Hugh Grand, Dennis Moynihan, David Prude, Dennis McCormick, Matt Ely, Anna Osbeck. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. Thanks so much for joining us.